Hello, welcome back. I'm John. Today I'm going to talk about Bobbie Ann Mason's Shiloh and Other Stories, which is really good. I really enjoyed this. Um, it made me realize something. Now, let me back up. So, Bobbie Ann Mason is from Kentucky. She's from where I'm from. Well, sort of in a roundabout way. Um, I've lived here most of my life anyway. I wasn't born here, but I've lived 20, 25 years here. That's Bobbie Ann Mason there. And she looks very, very familiar to me. And I can't figure out who she looks like that makes me think of her or vice versa. But anyway, I wanted to say Jane Curtin, but I don't think it was Jane Curtin that I was thinking of. But um, so anyway, these stories all take place in and around Kentucky. Um, so in the late 70s, the 60s, and the early 80s. And I was just really, really impressed by these stories. They're literary, and I have trouble with literary fiction. And while I was reading this, I think that I came to understand sort of why that is, or an aspect of it. And so I think this is the first book I've ever picked up where, I've read a lot of books. I've read many, many, many books. And this is the first book I've ever picked up where I thought, you know, I know these people. I know these people. I know this place. I know these conversations they're having. I know their lives. Um, so there aren't a lot of books I've ever read like this. Books where people work at Kmart, books where people go to yard sales and flea markets, and where they talk about what happened at church and that it has any relevance to me. In most literary stories, they take place in glitzy locations with, you know, very well educated socialites and that kind of thing, the upper class type of people. Or if they take place in lower class settings, usually the author is looking at it from outside or is looking down on the people, showing contempt towards them, even if it's unintentional, but basically saying these people are ignorant and um, this is the terror of their lives, the sadness of their lives. Isn't it a shame they couldn't be more educated, etc., etc. And she doesn't do this at all. I mean, she's very well educated herself, but she she observes her characters. I mean, we are there with her characters and we are listening to their thoughts, their ideas, their beliefs, how they came about those beliefs in some cases, and their unquestioned beliefs, things they've just kind of grown up with, or they just accept because they heard it from a lady um, they know at church or that they know at work or etc. etc. And yeah, it was just a very strange thing for me to pick up a book and not just recognize the places in the book, because I did recognize the places. I don't think I've been to Paducah, so these mostly take place in western Kentucky, but I've been through there. I've been through that area many times. And, you know, it's really odd for me to have a connection to a literary collection. It's not happened to me before. I don't really have, I'm not from an upper class background. Like I said before, I didn't go to college. I wanted to, but I never could decide why I wanted to go, and it just kind of fell on the wayside. Or I never decided what I wanted to go to college for. I changed my mind all the time, and one day I wanted to do this, and the next day I wanted to do that, but nothing was ever concrete enough. But that's not the point here. You know, the point is that it's very refreshing to have an author write a background that I understand from all levels of this book. I understood there's the uneducated, the the somewhat educated who now believe that they are, you know, ever so slightly superior to the uneducated, to their parents, to their grandparents. Their ways are the best ways, clearly. And, there is, I mean, she writes about everything in this book, everything that I can think of around here that you could possibly think to put in a book about the regular people of Kentucky. Married people, divorced people, single people. Now, mostly women, but there are some stories that take um, some stories that revolve around men or that focus on men. Not too many, but a couple. But we see these culture clashes between the older generations and the newer generations. We see unquestioned beliefs starting to be questioned even by the older people. And we see older people dealing with the process of aging, of coming to understand that their ways are fading away and that new ways are coming to replace them. And um, yeah, like I said, I was really impressed by this book, and it felt like I had known these people, and that's something I've never felt when I've read, you know, ancient Japanese stories or stories from the 19th century or the 18th century, that kind of thing. Stories that take place in high society. I don't feel any personal attachment to those kinds of stories. They're not my kind of people. They're not my sort of background. I'm very detached from all that. It's like, what am I going to get out of this story? I mean, I can, of course, empathize with the characters in certain ways. I can take sort of life lessons from them, but my life doesn't resemble theirs, whereas my life very much resembles the people in this collection. And I've seen these sorts of things myself. I have seen the culture clashes between the older generations and the younger generations, between the educated and the uneducated. And I mean that in all ways. I don't just mean college students or college graduates and non-college graduates. I picked out a passage here from the story Old Things. So this takes place, there is a lady named Cleo. She's a widow, and her daughter is married to a man, but they've been having problems. And the main problem is that Linda finds her husband to be incredibly boring. He works hard every day. He puts a roof over their heads and all that kind of thing. But he's boring. He comes home and he sits in his chair and he doesn't talk to her all evening. He doesn't do anything. He watches football and he doesn't pay any attention to his wife, basically. And Cleo can't understand why this isn't enough for Linda. Why? Because Cleo stayed with her husband for many, many years. And here's Linda, you know, wanting to be single, wanting to have a better life for herself, a more enjoyable life for herself. And if that means getting a divorce, then she's going to do it. Um, and Cleo just cannot understand what's going on in Linda's mind. She thinks for sure that she's going to change her mind, that she's going to revert to the old ways and she's just going to go back to her husband and cling on to this way of life that she's clearly unhappy with. And there's also an element of what will the neighbors say? And then Linda's thinking basically what I think, which is who gives a damn what the neighbors think? And, that's just, that right there is the generational clash that I'm talking about. So I thought I would just read a little bit of this. So this is Linda and Cleo talking. Linda's getting ready to go to a concert with her friend and leaving the kids at home. "We're getting on your nerves," says Linda. We're going to be getting out before long. I hope you mean going back home where you belong. Not that I mean to kick you out. You know what I mean. We're going back home, all right, Linda says. This is the big night. I'm going to meet Bob at Kinlake. I'm going to have it out with him. I can't wait. She wipes the rocker with a rag and turns it right side up. There. I think that's enough. What a job. If I could just find a twin to it. Tammy, turn that radio down. You're bothering Grandma. Cleo has to sit down. She is out of breath. The broom falls to the floor as she sinks onto the divan. Sorry. I'm not 16 anymore, she says. I give out too quick. Mama, there's not a thing wrong with you. You just don't do anything with yourself. What do you mean? Look at you. You're still a young woman. You could go to school, make a nurse or something. That Mrs. Smith over yonder is 68 and flies an airplane. By herself, too. I can see me doing that. Cleo clutches a needlepoint pillow. Tammy and Davy are arguing, sounding like wild Indians, but the racket is losing its definition around her. She finds it hard to pick out individual sounds. It is just a racket, something like a prolonged, steady snore, with lots of tuneful snorts and snuffles and puffs. Jake used to snore like that, but she could always tug the covers or kick at him gently and he would stop. Rita Jean said I was in the prime of life, says Cleo. Rita Jean should talk. Look at her. She petted that cat to death, if you ask me. And I never heard anything so ridiculous as her not wanting to go out west when she had the chance. I'd be gone in a minute. People can't just have everything they want all the time, Cleo says. I'm not mad at you, Mama, but people don't have to do what they don't want to as much now as they used to. I should know that, Cleo says. It's all over television. You make me feel awful. I don't mean to. It's for your own good. Prissytail jumps up on the divan, and Cleo grabs her. She squirms up onto Cleo's shoulder. You sure are lucky, Prissytail, that you don't have to worry, Cleo says. Linda pulls the rocker through the doorway into the living room. It scrapes the paint on the door facing. So that's pretty much how that right there. And I really like the fact that I read this entire story, or this entire collection rather, and I never one time thought, God, this is terrible dialogue. You know, it never struck a false note throughout the entire collection. It flowed along. I have a big problem with badly written dialogue. Some authors have a 10 ear for dialogue, and it makes reading their writing excruciating to me. But I really didn't have that problem with this book. And I mean, there's a couple of stories about a lady named Nancy Culpepper. She is a child of the 60s hippie sort of thing, and she married a man who sort of fit that ideal. You know, they met in college, of course, and all they had in common were these hippie ideals. Now they're 20 years older, 15 years older, and it's clear to us, the reader, what the problem with their marriage is, which is that they're both shallow individuals who chose each other for shallow reasons, even though they don't really know each other at all. They're strangers to each other beyond, you know, the typical hippie idealism of the 60s and 70s, you know. And I think they're gradually coming to realize that something isn't working. And there's one about an older couple. The man is a veteran of World War II. He was a sailor in the Navy on a destroyer. And his wife is, I can't remember exactly what she did. I can't remember if she was a housewife or if she had a job at the bank or something like that. But they have sold their home and bought an RV, and now they're traveling. They're going to travel the country. And, you know, of course, the beautiful idea of traveling never really quite matches the reality of traveling, And that was interesting. And they, you see once again, their beliefs as older people clashing with the beliefs of younger people, of the people they're meeting on the road. And now the first story, Shiloh, is about a man. He's a truck driver, like a semi-truck driver, and he's had a bad accident and basically busted his hip up really bad, and now he can't drive his truck because he can't work the clutch and shift and everything anymore. So he's home with his wife for the first time in something like 15 years every day. And they are strangers to each other. And while the man really loves his wife and wants to fix their marriage, his wife, on the other hand, starts to see him as a burden. She starts to realize that she doesn't really know him and she wants to improve her life. She starts going to night school. I can't remember exactly what she starts doing other than that. She's working out a lot, trying to get in shape, trying to get fit, trying to stop eating the traditional foods of the American South. Um, Lots of pork and greens and things of that nature. Taste really good, but they are really bad for you. Um, and he wants to save his marriage, and he wants to build her a log cabin, and he keeps with this idea of I'll build her a house, and she keeps drifting further and further away. And the reason it's called Shiloh is because his mother-in-law keeps saying, you two should go to Shiloh, the battlefield at Shiloh, because she had eloped with her husband to Shiloh, and that was like the high point of her life. So he takes his wife to Shiloh, and they have this, not exactly a confrontation, but that's where their problems come to a head, and they have sort of their falling out. There's a story about a girl who goes with her mother to the outskirts of Detroit in Michigan back in 1949. So Bobbie Ann Mason was born in 1940. She's still alive. But I'm not sure if this is something taken from her own life, but they go up north to stay with their relatives who have moved from Kentucky to work in the automobile factories. And basically her mother had seen the skyscrapers in Detroit and always remembered them, and she wanted to show her daughter because she might remember that her whole life and she may never be able to see them again. And just, it speaks about that crushing poverty, the difference between rural life, small town life, and city life. The girl sees TV for the first time in her life, and she becomes just enamored with TV and wants to watch it all the time. And she can't imagine having to go back home and not have a TV. And I think, I'm probably rambling on here, but I've really enjoyed this book. I really, really liked it. And like I said, it spoke to me. And that may be a first in my experience with reading literature. And like I said, it really opened my eyes to one of the reasons that I don't like literature, which is that I simply don't connect with it most of the time. I don't connect with the people, I don't connect with the places, and I don't connect with their problems. And I very much connected with the people and the places and the problems of these characters. So it was very special to me, and I don't know if um, maybe my judgment on it is clouded because of that. It's possible, but I really enjoyed it, and so I thought I would share it with you. And I'd love to hear your comments, or I'd love to hear your thoughts, rather. Leave a comment. And I wanted to thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.